Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bond, Schoeneck and King, a multi-practice law firm in Rochester with offices across New York State serving business, healthcare, and educational institutions. Online at bsk.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made on a bicycle. Rochester Bike Week kicks off today, and there are many ways for you to get involved in different community events. We're going to learn about some of the news when it comes to bolstering bike infrastructure in the area so riding is safer and more accessible for riders. That is coming up later in this hour's weekly news roundup. First, the city of Rochester is moving to foreclose on the city's only sanctioned homeless encampment, Peace Village. WXXI's Gino Fanelli tells us what's really going on. But we're starting this hour with a question. Where's the budget? What's the holdup with the New York State budget? The budget is now more than 5 weeks late, and as our colleague Jon Campbell reports, once it is passed, it will be the latest state budget since 2010. Jon joins us this hour to explain the latest and why some lawmakers are asking if the budget process should be changed. He's an Albany correspondent for WNYC, the Gothamist, and the New York Public News Network. Hello, Jon Campbell.
Hey, Evan. How are you?
I'm good. I know it's weird that the budget is late, but we're all getting used to it. No, look, we're used to late budgets, but this is a very late budget. And I'm just curious off the start if this has surprised even you to go, well into May here.
It has a little bit because this was looking like it was what we would call an election year budget, right? It didn't look like there was going to be any really, really big fights aside from perhaps one on car insurance, which we've talked about in the past. But yeah, this has just dragged on and on and on. And really, despite the governor announcing what she called a general agreement on the budget yesterday, there's still not really an end in sight in the near term. I think in all realistic possibility, it'll be in the next couple weeks. But it is dragged on and on and on. And like you said, some lawmakers, including Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie, blame that on the amount of non-fiscal policy that is in the budget and what's supposed to be a spending document. And that's, largely inserted by the governor because she determines that's when she has her most leverage is through the budget process.
Yeah, and so you've described this budget process as the upside down normal. But are there lawmakers who think, look, this whole process should change? Maybe we shouldn't have the governor trying to move sort of dollars and cents items through the budget. Maybe we should do things differently. Is that discussion happening?
Yes, to a certain extent. This is not a new discussion. This is something that, George Pataki, a Republican, used to battle with Sheldon Silver, the former Democratic Assembly Speaker, the late former Democratic Assembly Speaker, way back in the 90s and the early 2000s. It went through court, and it's complicated, but largely the governor's budget powers were upheld. So this is not a new clash. What is new is that the governor is Democratic, the Senate is Democratic, the Assembly is Democratic, and now they're battling about this. So Speaker Hastie has brought it up for weeks and weeks, and actually for years he has stripped all non-fiscal policy out of his budget proposal. The Assembly Democrats' budget proposal is kind of a sign of protest, but every year it keeps in there. And the governor makes the case that these are her priorities, but really they are good for the people of the state, and she's using the levers that she has to try to get them through. She is, largely the source of the delay in the sense that she has insisted on having, these 4 or 5 big policy priorities in the budget, including those car insurance reforms, including environmental review reforms for housing projects, including immigration assistance reforms and limiting local police from helping out, from cooperating with federal immigration enforcement. These are all the things that she is holding out for in her form too. I mean, she is largely holding out for the version of these proposals that she first proposed in January, and there's your delay.
So the question of what could this stuff really still be up for negotiation? Are they still fighting it out behind closed doors? And the answer at this point is always yes. I mean, there's always last-minute decisions on deals. I want to listen to a couple of pieces of sound from Governor Hochul. The first, we talked about billions of dollars for education and health systems, as well as a boost in retirement benefits for public workers that we're talking about. Let's listen to some of Governor Hochul on taxes there.
To help out New York City, we're finalizing the details of Pied-à-terre tax to help close the city's budget gap.
All right, I'm sorry. So that was on the Pied-à-terre tax there. So let's talk a little bit about the Pied-à-terre tax, because I think Mayor Mamdani got a lot of run for this, John, when he put a video out on tax day. And, it's this pretty sleek 1-minute video where he's talking about taxing luxury non-primary residents in New York City valued at $5 million or more. And the conservative political right says, well, you're going to drive wealthy people right out of New York City, Mayor. And the left says, look, those people don't even live there. That's not their primary residences. So it sounds like we've got a sense from where the governor is on this stuff. But you want to add some of what we're seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, the governor is facing a lot of pressure to raise taxes on the wealthy, not just from Mayor Mamdani, but from the left wing of her party, which has been pushing for it for years, but got a boost when Zohran Mamdani won the New York City mayoral election handily on a campaign of taxing the rich. So the governor has been very opposed to income tax hikes and corporate tax hikes. She's stood the line on that. But she has said that she will support a pied-à-terre tax, which is basically, as you described it, a tax on second homes in New York City worth more than $5 million. But that is really the problem now. The legislature is on board with that. The Democratic legislature is on board with that. But how do you determine what is worth $5 million? I mean, they're talking about $5 million in actual value, but in New York City, the property tax system is so screwed up that a condo that would sell for $100 million might be assessed at $2 million or $3 million. That's actually the case in Donald Trump's penthouse at Trump Tower, which he does not currently occupy. So they are really, really struggling between the state and the city finance officials to come up with a way to accurately assess the value in a way that will generate $500 million for the city, for New York City, which is facing a $5 billion budget deficit. So they're struggling. The governor, even at her announcement of a supposed budget deal yesterday, said they don't have that locked down. And that's one of the really big questions that's still being negotiated.
John, I'm sorry, briefly. The penthouse at Trump Tower is assessed at what?
It is assessed at a market value of just over $5 million, but then the assessed value is it's complicated. But the assessed value on condos is 45% of what the market value, quote unquote, market value as assessed by the city Department of Finance, and that comes in at about $2.5 million. So depending on what measure you use, it might not qualify, but that is what the governor and legislature are going through now, trying to come up with some sort of valuation method that accounts for that.
I mean, look, I'm not an expert in this particular story. I'd have to do a lot more reading. But when people get frustrated that really wealthy people are able to avoid certain taxes, and then they see that the penthouse at Trump Tower in New York City is getting a $2.5 million assessment when it could sell for, I don't know, John, $100 million?
A lot.
Then you feel like maybe the system isn't totally working. Anyway, that's for another day. So last point on that before we get a couple other points in with you, John. To me, the governor has made it clear over the years. She doesn't support the super wealth tax that some in her party do. That's been a fight for the last few years. She is concerned. She expresses more concern publicly with wealthy people leaving New York State if we went with like a super wealth tax, whereas a lot of people in her party say that's baloney. They can afford it. They're not going to leave this New York City. They're not going to leave the state. And she's kind of threading a needle with this. So she's not supporting the super wealth tax, but the pied-à-terre tax she'll get on board with. Is she trying to is this what she's going to give to Mayor Mamdani to try to get more in other places? Is this kind of a give and a little get for her?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, she's up for re-election this year, and
Mm-hmm.
she needs Mayor Mamdani's supporters in New York City to support her. I mean, it's kind of hard to believe that those supporters in particular would support Bruce Blakeman, the Republican candidate. But she wants that part of the party to be enthusiastic in going out and voting for her. But in terms of threading the needle, what she's trying to do here is tax people who are not primarily New York City residents or New York State residents, right? So a lot of these pied-à-terres, as they call them, are owned by people from out of state or even out of the country. They're often an investment vehicle and can be unoccupied. And so her argument is we're not taxing New Yorkers, we're taxing people from out of state. That's how we're going to do it. But she's running up into the difficulties of actually implementing this tax. I mean, it has been very difficult for them to land on a proper valuation method that would make this whole thing work in a way that generates the money that she wants it to for New York City.
All right, let's listen to what the governor says about what they are, in her words, delivering on.
We're delivering on affordability, on safety, on childcare, on the environment, and on housing.
So we'll see. But there's one other side to this story here, which is the question of what the big ugly is here. So, Jon Campbell, what is the big ugly?
Oh, that is just some great Albany parlance that has been around far longer than I have in Albany. And that is when you take all sorts of different controversial issues that have been debated in the legislature and with the governor, and you jam them into one bill. So the state budget, for example, has 10 different bills. That's 5 spending bills, basically, and 5 bills that change law to implement the budget. And a lot of times what they do is strip out the more difficult measures, put them all in one bill that is generally the last or second to last to be voted on. And then it's really tough to vote that down because there's going to be, if you've got a bill with 50 different parts in it, there's going to be something in there that you like. And there's going to be something in there that you don't like. So if you want to vote against the thing you don't like, you're also voting against the thing that you do like. So it becomes very, very difficult to vote that down. It doesn't only happen in the budget. It sometimes under Governor Cuomo and prior governors, it has happened at some sort of end of session deal outside of the budget where they're trying to get a controversial thing approved. But yeah, no, it almost certainly will happen this budget. It's happened pretty much every budget, and it's a way to get tough things passed.
And John, if you and I are running against each other in a future campaign, this is how I get to say in an ad, Jon Campbell voted against more money for saving wounded puppies because it was
Right.
in the big ugly bill, but there was 19 things in that bill that you felt were absolutely vital. And there were some things that you really didn't like, but you had to make the choice, and so you vote for the bill. And then in a future campaign, I get to say, well, why do you not like puppies, man? And, you're on the record voting against the puppies. Can't we separate this stuff out at this point? Can we not separate this stuff out?
Well, I mean, for a budget, that's very difficult because, I mean, when you're talking about $268 billion, there's many, many things that need to be approved to implement various parts of that. But this gets back to that debate about non-fiscal policy that Speaker Hastie is kind of leading the fight on. If there was not non-fiscal policy, things like the car insurance reforms that don't have anything really to do with the dollars and cents of the actual budget, if those weren't in there, then they would get the fiscal policy negotiated quicker. And we might not, and there would be a far slimmer budget in terms of legislation. So that's one of the arguments. And, we should also know, too, Speaker Hastie says there is no budget deal right now, despite what Governor Hochul says. He says he's going to draw the line now and say, hey, we got to get the fiscal policy done, the actual dollars and cents here done before I'm negotiating any of this non-fiscal stuff.
And so let's listen to the Assembly Minority Leader, the Republican Minority Leader in the New York State Assembly. Is it Ed Ra or Ray there, Jon Campbell?
It's Ra.
Ed
Ra.
Yeah, I don't. So this is Ed Ra. Let's listen to him on this subject.
They'll throw everything and the kitchen sink into it so that people who maybe aren't comfortable voting for it are stuck.
Yeah. He's not happy with it, but Republicans in Albany continue to have not enough power to do very much of anything, right, John?
Yeah, and particularly in the assembly, with apologies to any assembly Republicans out there, they have a very, very slim conference in the assembly. There's more than 100. There's 150 members in the assembly, and more than 100 of them are Democrats. So yeah, they don't have a lot of power to flex their muscle. And quite frankly, they hear a lot of the stuff that's going to be in or out of the budget from us, from members of the media before they see it in a bill or anything. We haven't seen any bill language on any of this stuff that has been negotiated since the governor's proposal and the Senate and the Assembly's proposal came out in later in March.
Jon Campbell, one of the best. Great to have you, sir. Go Sabres.
Yes, go Sabres. Go Sabres. Thank you, Evan.
I like seeing that over his shoulder. That's the great Jon Campbell joining us, talking about the state of the state budget. We're taking a short break. We're going to come right back and talk about one of the city's homeless encampments and its future next on Connections.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes, now supporting early childhood literacy through the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, providing books each month to children from birth to age 5 in the city of Rochester and beyond. More at unitedwayrocflx.org.
My next guest here, one of my colleagues is in studio. Gino Fanelli is investigations and City Hall reporter for WXXI News. And Gino, you were responsible for breaking a little news to the Rochester City Council president, among others, this week. What's going on?
Okay, so late last week, or week before that, the city filed its regular annual foreclosure listings that it does every year. And I printed them out. There's about 1,700 addresses on it. And one of them was 97 Industrial Street, which is where Peace Village is, the city-sanctioned homeless encampment that we've been writing about for years. Long, beleaguered project to set up a place for the homeless to just kind of stay and not really be bothered by having to go through the rigmarole of the shelter system. So I called Miguel Melendez, who is the city council president, and he has been the one kind of overseeing this purchasing of new shelters at the plot, and like, hey, did you know about this? And he didn't. So then I called the president of City Roots Community Land Trust, which owns the land that Peace Village is on and has this kind of relationship with the city to run the encampment there. And like, hey, did you know about this? Nope. So it was a very fun thing of this land is being foreclosed on, which is kind of a big deal in the world of, trying to get this thing off the ground. And the two parties that are kind of overseeing it were not really communicated that this was happening. So that's not great.
But I want to listen to a piece of sound from Patrick Beath, the city's attorney, who is making it clear that despite this, no one wants to see this land go to auction. No one wants to see it. Just because you see foreclosure doesn't mean what you might assume. And I want to listen to Patrick Beath on that.
The city has been working to improve Peace Village, and that has been a somewhat prolonged labor, but it's a labor that we are still undergoing. So we have no interest in seeing that parcel go to auction.
Okay, so what does that mean here?
It means, they owe about $1,400. So it's not like
a huge number.
It's not a huge number. It's a reasonable amount that they could fill in. But, to me, and again, this is years of reporting on the kind of struggles that this thing has had in getting off the ground. It's just another example of, wow, we're really not doing a great job at this. Like, every step of it has been beleaguered by poor planning from nonprofits. There's been tax issues at the other nonprofit that was involved with Peace Village. I believe they're kind of getting back up off the ground and working back together. And then you see a foreclosure listing, and it's just one thing after another, and it's failing the homeless population here. Like, that's just to be honest about it.
So let's step back, and why don't you describe for folks not only, you've kind of described what it is. It's the sanctioned encampment that's outside of the shelter system. But how permanent is it, and what is the goal that has been expressed about what it could become?
So let's back up. So just a little bit of history here. 2018, there was another homeless encampment, also called Peace Village, that was unsanctioned on South Avenue. And under Mayor Lovely Warren, that camp was cleared out. It was a lot of
bulldozed.
Bulldozed. A lot of community activists were very upset by it. They had fought to, stop it from happening, and it happened anyway.
I think it happened like the week of Christmas.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
Like
and
that.
It wasn't the last time that they cleared a homeless encampment right around Christmas, by the way, because I've been at others where they did that, but neither here nor there. in the aftermath of that, this land was kind of relegated. It was purchased by City Roots Community Land Trust and kind of relegated as like, okay, we can set up a permanent homeless encampment here with the blessing of the city, and people can come and stay here. No strings attached, no oversight, nothing. And the place, before all of this stuff with the new shelters and everything happened, it was pretty squalid. It was infested with rats. Half the structures were burned down. They were mostly like Home Depot sheds that people were staying in. It was not a place that was very pleasant. But it was a place where a lot of the homeless advocates I worked with have, said like, it's at least something where we know where people are. Because most of the time, if you let people to their own devices, they're going to be moving from encampment to encampment as they get cleared out, or they go into abandoned houses. And once they're in the abandoned houses, it becomes a much more dangerous thing to do outreach there. You don't know who's in that house. You don't know how they'll react to you coming in. It becomes a much more complicated process of keeping track of people and offering them services when you don't know where they are and they aren't easily accessible. So that was kind of the idea behind, why Peace Village is important. 2022, there was a clearing of a large homeless encampment on Loomis Street off Joseph Avenue. We reported on that pretty extensively. It was a really pretty awful circumstances there too. But the alternative that was given to the people staying there is that they would be taken to Peace Village, which a lot of them were. A lot of them didn't want to go there. It was not a great place to be dropped off at to begin with. It was pretty bad there. So 2023, Miguel Melendez comes up with this idea of we're going to take some funding, which was formerly part of the Police Accountability Board's budget. They had money left over when that money was kind of held. And we're going to buy these pallet shelters. They're kind of self-contained, heated, cooled units that can be set up on the site. $750K. They bought 15 of these units, had them delivered, I believe, in April of that year. It was April of that year. And they are now sitting in a backyard of a neighborhood service center on Dewey Avenue in storage. And
Still.
Yeah, it's still. They were covered in snow 3 seasons now. Whether or not that affects anything, the structures, I don't know that. I don't want to go that far into the thinking about it. But in the reality is, like, we have the shelters. Like, we own them. They are on city property right now. One of them is actually constructed. I believe it might be storing some of like the mechanical components of the other structures. But again, I'm just guessing here. But you can go there and see it set up in the backyard of this neighborhood service center. And they're just not being set up. The land itself on Industrial Street has been roughed in. It has pipes, water, electricity ready to go. There's slabs there to put the shelters on. It is ready to go. You can plug them right in. But because of the issues with all the nonprofits and the just finding someone to oversee the site, which has become a very costly endeavor, about $1 million a year just to have on-site operations there, and the insurance liability, it just hasn't happened yet. And there's a chance it could happen this year, but kind of doubt it.
But when you see the foreclosure notice, when you see that the city of Rochester is foreclosing on what looks like Peace Village, the headline is going to make some people think, well, that's the end of this. And it doesn't look like that's the case. But I want to ask you, from what you understand, my guess is there's 2 reasons that this would end up on the list of foreclosures that even the city council president would need to find out from you about. The 2 reasons would be this. The first is just it's a formality. Mm-hmm. If you have, they're behind what, $1,400. There's a tax lien now, and maybe it's a formality. If you're behind, you haven't paid, you go on the foreclosure list. Maybe that's the case. Or maybe they're trying to light a fire to say we need someone who can keep their stuff together here to get this done here. Like you said, as you said, we have the infrastructure. The homeless population needs this, but we need a partner who is going to be buttoned up.
I think it's more the former.
Just a formality?
I think it was just, they went through their list of properties that have tax liens and they put them on. And most of, maybe not most, but a good portion, if not the majority of the properties that go on a foreclosure listing end up clearing their tax liens and are fine. So a foreclosure doesn't mean the end of the road. However, the impression, it's one of those things that's like, as a journalist, you kind of look at it as, is the impression coming off that this is the end of the road what I'm aiming for? No, But is the impression that this is something that's just fine and normal and everything is okay also the right takeaway here? Absolutely not, too. The very fact that it ended up on that list shows that there's a deep problem here, that people are asleep at the wheel. And if you're not paying your taxes and not paying attention, when you have land that you're trying to do something good with and have fought for, and the end result is you're just like not paying attention to your tax bills, I think that's embarrassing. And I think that that's the kind of thing that there should be accountability for, in the sense of maybe you do need to button up more. Maybe you need to pay attention and, make sure that you aren't going into tax foreclosure. And I think that's it's just it's a smaller increment in the longer story of what's been happening at Peace Village, but it's also representative of like the many, many easily avoidable problems that have occurred. I mean, the previous Peace Village Inc., the problem that they had, which was the nonprofit meant to oversee the actual camp, the problem they had is they stopped filing their IRS tax paperwork. And I believe they're getting back on track, but come on, you have one job, and this is it. If you're running a nonprofit, you have to file your tax paperwork. That's part of being a nonprofit. And when you fail to do that, I think it is something that deserves scrutiny. And so there.
So let's wrap up with this here. You report that in 2025, an annual point-in-time count of the homeless found 1,194 people without permanent shelter in this county, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you some of the number. It's nearly double the number from the previous year. We have a homeless problem. This is not the single solution, but it's one piece that has been described. But here's what I'm left wondering that I want to close with. This was a $1,400 tax lien that led to a foreclosure notice. $1,400. Meanwhile, the annual projected cost that you told us, $1 million a year, City Council has only dedicated, $290,000 annually?
To services there. And it wasn't even annually. It was for, I believe, a one-time contract with PCHO.
So if they struggle with this $1,400 tax payment, and they've got $1 million annually they've got to raise or cover, and we're not sure what the city is going to be able to help with, does that look like a stable future?
No, none of this looks like a stable future. The amount that Person-Centered Housing Options has put up very earnestly for how much the operational cost that the city demanded the components to, the security, the cameras, the food, all of that stuff. What they put up is actually not unreasonable if you're meeting what the city is demanding. Is it sustainable budget-wise? Probably not. I don't think.
Well, could the city say, "Okay, we're going to do $1 million a year for you. We'll pay it"?
They could.
They could.
They could do a lot of things. They could house these people if they wanted to do that. They could start taking a lot of the vacant properties in the city and making them livable and letting people stay in them, and that probably would cost less than $1 million a year. The solution in reality to all of this is you have to put homeless people into housing. And I think PCHO has a housing first model where they do try to get people that are living on the street to transition into a permanent housing environment. And I think it's a noble mission. I think most of the people here have good intentions and good ideas. But when we're talking about 7 figures, 8 figures in the long run to run a homeless encampment, and which is not a solution to the problem. It's a Band-Aid on the issue, and everyone involved acknowledges that it's not a permanent solution.
Right.
It's a transition at best from people that are in a very dire circumstance. But when it comes to actually funding the access to housing that people that are truly destitute need, it's an empty bag.
Yeah.
So I think that when we look at this, I think it's a lot of embarrassing nonprofit stuff that is very indicative of the nonprofit world and environment and everything like that, that all these things keep happening. Best of intentions, path to hell, all that. But how it's actually playing out and how we're addressing the core issues, I don't think we are. And that's where it kind of stands right now.
So the reason that Peace Village could be in trouble in the long run is not because of this foreclosure notice per se. It's because the bigger issues still haven't been solved.
The bigger issue is a systemic problem of the way our society functions. And it's one that we kind of look at homelessness and we look at people that are unhoused and we say that sucks and we let them continue to do it. And we offer no real, true, meaningful alternative to living on the street for a lot of the people that are living on the street. And that's the sad reality of the world we live in.
Thanks for this reporting.
Yeah, of course.
Gino Fanelli, breaking news as always. That is what he does.
Happy Lilac Fest.
Happy Lilac Fest. Happy Bike Week. We're going to close the week. I'm going to get on the bicycle, and we're going to close the week telling you about Bike Week next.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. Proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, focused on the news, issues, and trends that shape the lives of listeners in the Rochester and Finger Lakes regions. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
This is Connections, and we are ending the week with those who want you to get on your bicycle, maybe get back on your bicycle, get on for the first time. Rochester Bike Week is kicking off today, runs through the 17th. We talked to Jesse Piers not so long ago, but we knew we were going to come back during Bike Week to make sure everyone knows what's going on. And if Jesse has anything to say about it, this is one of the big trends locally. More people are getting on their bicycles. Yes?
I would say so, for sure.
Jesse is cycling manager for Reconnect Rochester. Daniel Brzezlowski is co-founder of Keeping It Classy Cycle Club. Hello, Daniel.
Hello.
And Adrian Martin is a cyclist and a dad. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, good to be here. Thanks.
So, Jesse, big day. What's going on for people who are not aware?
So Bike Week starts tonight, and we're going to kick off the festivities with a big ride down at Genesee Valley Park, where the pool and sports complex is. People will start gathering at 7 o'clock. Everybody uses creative lighting to light up themselves along with their bikes. The county executive and deputy mayor will deliver some remarks, and then kickstands up at 7:45 or so for a fun romp around trails and bike boulevards.
So we'll get into more of these specific plans coming up here. I do want to ask you, Jesse, a little bit about some news that I know some folks are excited about, which is a new custom grading system for bike infrastructure.
Yeah, Rochester has been building bike infrastructure since 2011 or 2012. And there's not a way to assess that infrastructure. The city doesn't really have a feedback mechanism when they complete a project, how cyclists like it. There's no celebratory rides there's no ribbon cuttings for new infrastructure. There's no neighborhood parties inviting residents to come out and try it. And we felt that there needed to be a mechanism wherein we could let cyclists and ordinary residents know about new infrastructure, try it once in each direction, tell us how you like it, and for the city to receive some feedback. Because with their goals that they have in place, they want to build bike infrastructure that is not only comfortable for those of us already riding, but to build bike infrastructure for those who are not yet comfortable riding. So they deserve some level of feedback. So we're excited for it. I think the city, to a degree, is excited for it. So check out our new custom grading system.
All right, and I want to ask all three of you, if I could, about the news that we talked about last hour, which is that the city of Rochester has Vision Zero. Again, the idea behind Vision Zero is zero fatalities on the roadways. And Rochester is more dangerous for pedestrians, bicyclists, bus riders, drivers than Buffalo, more dangerous than Syracuse, more dangerous than many cities of its size in the country when you look at the data of crashes, injuries, and fatalities. And part of what the city is looking at is a number of possible remedies. There's not any one thing, but it could be speed cameras for cars. It could be new versions of red light cameras, which may give everyone whiplash, but it's not the same as the old red light cameras. Could be some other things. Could be road diets here and different lanes there. In general, Jesse Piers, I'll start with you. I'll go around the table. When it comes to Vision Zero, are you at least happy to see the city soliciting public feedback? Do you think they're serious about it? Are you happy to see some of the proposals, or at least some of the ideas that are being discussed?
Yeah, I mean, Reconnect Rochester from the very beginning was very clear that if we pursue anything like this, it has to be accompanied by a large sweeping package with better engineering standards, educational efforts, lawn signs, the whole bit. So, like a lot of cities around the United States, there was a real backing off of enforcement after 2019 and 2020, and it kind of feels to a lot of us, whether you're biking or walking or driving, that it's the wild, wild west out there right now, that there is zero consequences for blowing red lights, for speeding, for putting residents' lives in danger. So I don't know anyone that would say the status quo is okay. And cameras are a proven way in other cities to make that unwanted behavior a deterrent. And it's not like an astronomical amount that you would get fined. I think the proposed amount is $50, which is the cost of a tank of gas. So it's not the only solution, but there has to be consequences when you put fellow residents' lives in danger.
Okay, go around the table. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, I do think that it's a carrot and a stick problem. You know, the lack of enforcement is an issue. It also is just a problem that is so easily mediated, or at least reduced by reducing speed. You know, road diets and other kinds of preventative measures that enable more pedestrian safety do really help with the danger factor. You know, we are all sharing the same space to some extent. So the goal is just to make everyone a little bit more mindful of where everybody else is and, you know, reduce the worst possible outcome to something that's maybe less bad. Because, you know, we call them accidents, we call them crashes, but accidents do happen. So I think that speed reduction goes a long way to reducing problems.
What do you think, Adrian?
For a long time, living in Rochester as a cyclist, it really felt like the government was kind of indifferent as to whether I was killed on the streets. You know, there was, you know, we're no longer going to do red light cameras. We're not doing a road diet on Lake Avenue. And then, so when the mayor and Councilmember Gruber announced Vision Zero, you know, that was a shift, and it felt like, all right, you know, the city now is changing, and the city wants to keep me alive, and you know, wants to keep my kids that bike alive. And there's a lot of kind of low-hanging fruit that we can do, you know, but it is a huge project. I know it's going to take a long time before Rochester becomes like, you know, Copenhagen or the Netherlands or something like that. But I see this as, you know, the first step in, you know, the first step is saying, yeah, we want to achieve a city in which people aren't killed when they're going to work.
How many kids do you have? 3. And are they bicycle age?
Yeah, 5, 9, and 12. Yep.
Oh, that's very bicycle age.
Yeah, yeah.
And do you feel safe with them on bicycles in the city of Rochester?
I plot out routes in which we are safe. And, you know, Rochester is a city where you can basically get from most places within the city to most other places within the city on a bike safely, you know, with your kids. It's not a city where you can just say, "Oh, I need to go there, and I'm gonna go that direction," without pre-planning. You know, you need to pre-plan your route. Reconnect Rochester has a great resource for that, the Rock Easy Bike Map, and but also, you know, also just like, you know, 15 years of cycling in Rochester, I know the shortcuts and stuff. You know, the contrast is when, you know, last summer I lived in the Netherlands for a month with my kids for my wife's job, and we rented bikes, and we would just kind of go at the door and bike where we wanted, and we never had any close calls. We never had any situations in which I felt we got to turn around. It was just I had absolute confidence every route was safe, and that's the goal, you know, for Rochester. So
have you been following the city's proposed bike spine network?
Yeah, yep.
How far does that go for you to help?
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the inability to just leave your house and go on a bike with kids is you got these choke points. So, for instance, you know, if you're on Field Street, which is a very easy bikeable street, and you want to cross Monroe and 490 and get onto Dartmouth or Canterbury, which are also, you know, bike boulevards, how do you get there? You have to cross Monroe and you have to cross 490, and the Monroe 490 bridge is not safe for inexperienced cyclists. You got to go up on the sidewalk, but also when you're on the sidewalk, you have to watch for turning drivers who don't necessarily respect lights, who don't stop, you know, where they're supposed to stop at a red, who roll through when they do a right on red. So the bike spine, you know, would be a way to say, like, I know if I need to get, you know, north, I can get to this part of the spine, and then I can just go north, and then I get off of that part of the spine. So
that's one thing the city's doing. The city is also studying how to better tackle maintenance of bike infrastructure in winter. Mm-hmm. So they want to demo protected bike lanes in 4 quadrants in 2028. to see how they would hold up with everything that happens, not just the snows, but the plows and the salt and everything else. Are you guys optimistic about that? Daniel, are you optimistic that that could help?
I am optimistic it could help. I mean, I personally, in my route to work, I'm a regular bike commuter, I would say. My route to work becomes completely impassable in the winter, just because of the lack of any kind of deliberate maintenance of infrastructure. And I think that any effort is good effort there, you know? Like, we do have hard winters. Winters are a problem, but they're not a unique problem we have. Other places can have solved this issue, and we can look to them for, you know, help with solutions. There are special, you know, small plows. There's sweepers instead of the plow that kind of creates the ice crust that becomes so hazardous for us cyclists. There are, you know, there's a lot of different potential solutions, you know, and I would really love to see just something there.
How do you see that one, Jesse?
I'm excited for the demo project. You know, I remember on Broad Street and North Chestnut Street, we had some protected bike lanes back in 2016 or so with flex posts, and it got us bike riders excited that, oh, yes, more of that, please. But we never got any more because sometimes flex posts and bollards go missing when they're put away for the season and they never get reinstalled. And, you know, I started getting my feet wet in bike advocacy in 2014 or 2015. And an excuse that I've always kind of heard from the city's end about protected bike lanes as well. You know, if we make a protected bike lane, we don't have a way to maintain it and make it usable in the winter. And we've been pressing them for the past 10 years that, you know, this is not a, like Dan said, it's not unique to Rochester. Other cities can figure this out, and we can too.
So let's spend our remaining time talking about Bike Week. And I want to start by asking you who it's for. Who is Bike Week for?
It's for everybody. You know, when you talk to a cycling enthusiast, they will immediately say, every day is bike day. Every week is Bike Week. So this is, you know, those who are already riding are going to continue to ride. We ride most or all of the year here in Rochester. This is designed for the ordinary person that they have a bike. Maybe they haven't ridden it in a while. Maybe they've never participated in a group ride, and it's to show off the bike infrastructure, the beautiful trail system we've got, the amazing welcoming bike community that we have in Rochester. So it's geared towards everyone.
So you mentioned a little bit about tonight, but again, tonight, 7:15 p.m. is the official time. When do people need to be out for the Light Up the Night ride?
I would say you definitely need to be there by 7:30. There's a quick waiver to sign. We've got a pump for your tires, but we're going to roll out at 7:45 at the latest.
Okay, and go where for people who missed it?
reconnectrochester.org/Bike Week has the full schedule.
And there's a number of events this weekend. On Saturday, 8 a.m., there's a Just for Giggles coffee ride. There's a 10:30 to noon balance and ride class. And at 2 p.m., Adrian's the official contact for this one, the Flower City Family Cycling Ride. That's at Genesee Valley Park's Roundhouse Shelter. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, so we got about a 3.5-mile route. It's all safe for kids, and we're basically going to the back of the airport. I'm going to watch planes take off and land, and then ride back. And we did this last year as well, and people had a blast.
Okay, so that's at 2 p.m. You departing at 2 p.m.?
We'll probably leave like 2:10. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, you know, be on time for these if you can here.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday, it is Mother's Day, of course. You've got a 9 a.m. event there, the Two Parks West Ride with the Rochester Bicycling Club. And that is in Spencerport, right? So people might be assuming that every event here is somewhere in the downtown Rochester vicinity. And Jesse, this is for everybody listening in every county, in every place?
It's for Monroe County. You know, we had some debate at Reconnect Rochester. Do we call it Monroe County Bike Week? Do we call it Rochester Bike Week? Rochester Bike Week just has a better ring to it, but it is countywide.
Okay, so the full schedule Jesse talked about, we'll post a link to it, but what is on the list that you are particularly excited about coming up here, Jesse?
Oh, gosh. I mean, there's the George Eastman Bike Tour.
Tell us about that one.
So that'll be Saturday, May 16th, 10 o'clock at the George Eastman Museum. I used to work at the George Eastman Museum, cataloging his letters and vacation photos. So I know a lot about the guy. And we had a driving tour of George Eastman that we compressed to make it shorter and bikeable. So that is always a treat. I'm teaching a bike class on Monday. If there's anybody out there that kind of is intrigued by the idea of using their bike more, of riding more, but they don't feel safe or they don't feel comfortable, they don't know how to use the gears on their bike properly, that class is designed to give people the confidence to enjoy riding more. But there are so many, I mean, the schedule is so full. There's so many group rides. Usually the Kick Flower Pedal Populaire is the grand finale at the end. They couldn't do that this year, but I'm glad that our friend Megan with Rochester Rainbow Riders is organizing for Sunday, May 17th, a queer history tour starting at the Three Heads Brewing on Atlantic Avenue. So we've still got a grand finale, and the schedule is just chock full of fun events.
Daniel Breslowski, anything you're looking forward to?
Yes, I am looking forward to that history tour, the ride that is kind of our substitute for next Sunday. That'll be very fun.
Okay, Adrian Martin?
Yeah, I mean, the shorter ride of the Flower City Family Cycling Ride is the one that I'll be doing with my 5-year-old. Unfortunately, I can't make the Light Up the Night ride this tonight, but I've done that in the past with carrying kids on the front or the back of my bike, and they have a blast just seeing all the, basically it looks really cool when you're on one side of the river and half the group's on the other side of the river and you can see the lights just moving down the river path there.
Bob texts to ask if this panel can talk about something that was discussed last hour. He says that last hour we talked about the fact that apparently driver's ed courses are, schools are doing less of that. I am out of touch with that stuff. But there's the idea that part of the reason that the roads are not as safe as they should be is because people who drive cars aren't as educated about roadway safety, infrastructure, rules of the road, laws, etc. Bob wants to know if our panel agrees and if the panel thinks there should be bicycle education classes as well as part of the school system. Jesse Pierce?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is the place, school, where you should learn how to ride a bike safely and legally. It's actually New York state law for school districts to do that. In experience, it's not enforced. There's really no way to enforce it, and there's a lot of schools that don't teach that biking safety. But ideally, it's something that everybody would learn so that they don't have to take a class when they're an adult.
Do you think drivers of cars are less educated today than they used to be?
What I will say most firmly, and I could do an entire episode about this, is when you have a driver's license, you take a one-time test and you have that license for life, you could have gotten a driver's license in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the early 2000s. The landscape has changed. We're in a very different world now. The United States reallocating road space bike movement started really in 2007. So I know that when I worked at a warehouse and moved boxes around with a pallet jack, I had to be recertified every few years by OSHA to move things around on a crate. Yet when it comes to drive a 3,000-pound box with steel and gasoline, you only have to be tested once. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't know any politician that would want to double or triple the size of the DMV bureaucracy in order to test people every few years. But ideally, we would, because we need everybody to be safe. And they're navigating an environment that's very different from the Robert Moses, Leave It to Beaver era.
What do you think, Daniel?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, just the problem of distracted driving has only gotten worse. And I don't necessarily know that drivers are less educated now, but there's certainly a lot more things fighting for our attention inside a car. There's vehicle screens, there's phone screens, there's any number of other sort of distractions. I would say that roadways themselves are more distracting as well, visually. And there's also just, we're all kind of trying to fight for the same space, cyclists and pedestrians and cars.
Okay. Adrian, what do you think?
I agree that things are much different now. The other part of that is that the vehicles are different now. They're much larger. Now when you stomp on the gas, you can go 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, and that's no longer like a supercar. Whereas 50 years ago, that was a huge deal. Now it's kind of commonplace, especially with electric cars. Things are definitely different. You have more powerful, more dangerous cars and more distracted driving. So,
Mike writes in to say, I work as a delivery driver in town. We see every day people driving distracted, impaired by alcohol and marijuana, speeding and just ignoring the rules of the road. The police do not seem to care and are not enforcing the laws. I hope that technology can help. People will only obey the laws that are enforced. That is from Mike. And Carly says, Evan, we'd love a good old-fashioned crossing guard. My family lives near Winton and Blossom, and it's a choke point. So many kids can't walk to play because that intersection is so dangerous. Any idea if crossing guards are in city plans? What do you know about that from Reconnect Rochester? Anything on crossing guards? No? Adrian?
I sent a video of Harvard Street and Barrington Street to the City Traffic Control Board, during school, go to school hours, and they were horrified, and we got a crossing guard like the next week. So they can be very responsive. And
but they got to hear from you.
You have to know to contact them. But that's the Traffic Control Board. If you look it up, if you Google it, you should be able to find it.
All right, last 30 seconds. Jesse Pierce with the start of Rochester Bike Week. Yeah, we've talked about the events, but in general, during Bike Week, you want people, even if they can't go to the events, just to think about trying to use the bicycle more often. Is that fair?
Yeah. Even if you never bike in traffic to your workplace, just ride the beautiful trail system that we've got. We've got a wonderful county to ride a bike in.
Where are you most happy on a bicycle in our county?
The Bike Boulevard system is great. I use it to get all over, especially downtown and to Red Wings games.
Okay. Daniel, where are you happiest on a bicycle?
Happiest on a bicycle. I would say crossing the Ponderan Bridge when it's reopened. Excited for that. I would say zooming down Field Street in Swilberg neighborhood. And I would say up around my neck of the woods in North Winton.
All right, Adrian?
Surviving Tryon Park on a mountain bike.
I love it. Happy Bike Week, everybody. Jesse, one more time, where can people learn more about the calendar of events?
ReconnectRochester.org/Bike Week.
Jesse Pierce, Daniel Brzezlowski, Adrian Martin. It all kicks off tonight. Thank you, guys. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
And happy weekend from all of us at Connections. Thank you for being with us. We are back with you next week on member-supported public media.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.